On April 15, 2013, the Boston Marathon, one of the world's oldest and most prestigious sporting events, was marred by an unimaginable tragedy. As runners approached the finish line, two bombs exploded in rapid succession amid the crowd, turning the joy of victory into utter horror. Smoke filled the air, screams rang out, and bloody bodies fell to the pavement. Horrifying images of the bombing circulated around the world, highlighting the fragility of peace in events that were supposed to be about sportsmanship and unity. A marathon, or any race longer than that, is typically 40.2 kilometers or 26 miles long. Most marathons are at least 50 kilometers or 31 miles long, but many marathons are much longer. Races can last for several days, covering hundreds of kilometers. The Boston Marathon is the oldest annual marathon in the world, first held in 1897. With a tradition of more than a century, it is not only a race but also a symbol of sportsmanship and perseverance. Every year, more than 30,000 athletes from all over the world converge on Boston to participate in this event. Along the 26.5-mile route from Hopkinton to downtown Boston, hundreds of thousands of spectators line both sides of the road to cheer on the athletes. In 2013, the race took place on Patriots' Day, a public holiday in Massachusetts, attracting a large crowd. Among those standing at the finish line were families, friends of the runners, tourists, and even children. The Boston Marathon is more than just a marathon. It is an iconic event in the sporting culture of the United States and the world. This event has become one of the most prestigious tournaments in the global athletics community from more than 100 countries. The appeal of the Boston Marathon lies not only in its long-standing tradition, but also in its fierce competition and strict selection of athletes. This is one of the few marathons that requires participants to achieve a minimum time standard in other official tournaments to be eligible to register, a factor that makes this race sacred and desirable. Financially, although the Boston Marathon does not have a super huge prize fund like tournaments in Dubai or London, it is still among the most attractive prizes on the planet. The total prize money was around $800,000, divided between the men's, women's, wheelchair and disabled categories. However, unlike many modern marathons that are held on flat terrain, the Boston Marathon takes place on a natural course with many long uphill sections, headwinds, and unpredictable weather challenges, especially Heartbreak Hill, a nearly 700-meter stretch that begins at mile 20 and ends near mile 21, where many runners collapse from exhaustion. The main route of the race is 40.195 kilometers long, starting in the town of Hopkinton in western Massachusetts and ending at Boylston Street in downtown Boston. Along the way, runners will pass through many towns such as Ashland, Framingham, Natick, Wellesley, Newton, and Brookline. Over its century-long history, the Boston Marathon has seen participation from not only professional athletes, but also many famous people around the world, from actors, politicians, to social activists and celebrities in the community. Desiree Linden, the famous American athlete who won the Boston Marathon in 2018 in cold and rainy conditions, becoming the first American to win the race in more than 3 decades. Tedy Bruschi, former football player for the New England Patriots. After suffering a stroke in 2005, he made an effort to recover and completed the Boston Marathon in 2012 to raise funds for the Stroke Prevention Organization. Ryan Hall, the American who holds the national record for the half marathon. Although a professional athlete, Hall is also an icon loved by many people for his humble personality and extraordinary efforts. Equipment on the body. Athletes, both professional and amateur, must carry a number of mandatory devices. Electronic chip timing chip, usually attached to the shoelace or on the back of the bib. This device helps the organizers record the exact time each person starts, arrives at important time points miles 5, 10, 20 ... closing parenthesis and finish. Bib number. Each person is given a separate number, which can contain a chip and personal information, which can be scanned in an emergency. Some athletes also carry a sports GPS watch, such as a Garmin or Apple Watch, to track heart rate, pace, distance, and calories burned. Athletes with disabilities or wheelchairs also have special assistive positioning devices or speed sensors depending on the category. Weather is always unpredictable in Boston, especially in mid-April. In the days leading up to the 2013 race, The weather was fairly stable, partly sunny, with temperatures ranging from 10 degrees Celsius to 15 degrees Celsius, with light winds and no rain. Initial forecasts called for pretty ideal conditions that year, with no signs of extreme weather. The Boston Marathon is not just a race against time and physical limits, it is also a journey of self-transcendence, where people push the boundaries of will and endurance. That is why when tragedy struck in 2013, at the very place that had witnessed thousands of genuine smiles and kisses, it touched the hearts of millions around the world. Come race day, April 15, 2013, a warm Monday. As the athletes lined up at the starting line in light athletic wear like shorts and t-shirts, Boston was ablaze with Patriots' Day, a Massachusetts tradition where people gathered to celebrate both the history of the Revolution and the festivities of America's most prestigious marathon. Flags and flowers were flying all over the streets. Hundreds of thousands of people poured into the streets, not only to cheer on the more than 27,000 runners from around the world, but also to share the joy, to live in a moment of unity and will to rise. The morning passed peacefully. The professional runners had started early and were slowly making their way toward the finish line, where Boylston Street was packed with spectators. Runners for charity, for community, for personal beliefs, continued to make their efforts over the final miles. As time passed into the afternoon, when most of the spectators were already at the finish line to welcome acquaintances, friends, and family, a nightmare began to unfold. At 2:49 p.m., when the timer shows 4 hours 9 minutes and 43 seconds, a deafening explosion ripped through the air at the finish line, right in front of the Boston Public Library. For a moment, white smoke billowed, dust and metal fragments flew. Screams and chaos erupted, blood spattered the pavement. People had no idea what was happening. Just seconds later, before the crowd could recover, a second explosion rang out, about 180 meters from the first place. This time, those who had turned to run, looking for an escape route, were stopped by a second blast from hell. The two bombs, later identified as pressure cookers packed with iron nails, steel balls and explosives, were hidden in backpacks and placed near the cheering crowd. They were intended not just to kill, but to inflict maximum injury. Weapons of war had been introduced into a sporting festival. Blood, wails, and cries for loved ones filled the air in a scene no one had ever imagined would occur at a marathon. Martin Richard, an 8-year-old boy, was one of the first to die. The first bomb exploded close to where Martin was standing. He died instantly. His mother, Denise, suffered severe head injuries, and his sister, Jane, who was only 6, lost a leg. A family was torn apart in an instant, before their joy could even take shape. Crystal Campbell, 29, of Arlington. Lingzi Liu, a 23-year-old Chinese graduate student at Boston University, along with 3 others killed. More than 260 others were injured, including 17 who lost limbs. Some were impaled by metal fragments. Some lost both legs. Many of the victims were cheerleaders, children, the elderly, support staff, people who had no real problem with the world. They were simply in the wrong place at the wrong time. Hospitals within a 10-kilometer radius were immediately mobilized. Doctors who had been preparing for a holiday were suddenly thrown into a battlefield nightmare. Massachusetts General and Brigham and Women's Hospital received the most seriously injured. On the security side, the situation was initially chaotic. No one knew if there was a third or fourth bomb. Downtown Boston was locked down. Subway stations and bus terminals were shut down. The 2013 Boston Marathon bombings sparked outrage and anxiety across the United States. A manhunt was immediately launched. 2 brothers, Tamerlan and Dzhokhar Tsarnaev, of Chechen descent, were identified as the prime suspects. During a tense, days-long manhunt, Tamerlan was killed in a shootout with police, and Dzhokhar was captured while hiding in a boat in a backyard. He was sentenced to death in 2015. The attack changed the way America handled major sporting events. Security measures were tightened, with bag checks and security checks becoming standard at most large events. The following year's Boston Marathon took place under the watchful eye of thousands of police officers, with a variety of surveillance measures in place. Yet, from the tragedy, a powerful spirit of unity emerged. The phrase "Boston Strong" became a symbol of the city's unity and perseverance. Stories of courage, of those who sacrificed themselves to save others, of victims who overcame adversity to continue living, have become a source of inspiration for many people around the world. The Boston Marathon continues to run every year, in the spirit of not backing down in the face of terror. The 2013 tragedy remains vivid in the memories of those who lived through it, but it also serves as a reminder that even in the darkest of times, the human spirit can shine.